Good morning, all. Thank you for bearing with us through a couple of technical delays, but we're here this morning at the beginning of the third day of the 2018 International Home and Houseware Show. And this is an event I think all of us put a circle around on our calendars when we first find out about what's going on at the show. As he has now for many years, Tom Mirabile, who is IHA's trend expert and Senior Vice President, Global Trend and Design for Lifetime Brands, is here to help us discover what is going on with the consumer today. Tom was so excited about being here, he slept in his shoes last night. Won't you welcome Tom Mirabile?
Hi. I just realized that, oh, there it is. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here so early. I really appreciate it. It's always nice to have so many people here. And people keep drifting in throughout, so that's nice, too. So I actually didn't sleep last night because I'm always changing this till the last minute, and next thing I knew, I looked at the clock, and it was late, and I was like, okay, 4 o'clock. If I go to sleep now, I'll sleep through it, so I'm not going to do that. I always sort of start out with, because I'm a very nervous speaker, in case you can't tell, I always start out, how many of you have been with me before, like at this ungodly time of day? Okay. So I always start out with something embarrassing that happened in the last year, because that sort of helps me get past all that. So this year's no exception. I was doing a presentation like this to a group in the UK, and it was actually 2 presentations, 1 hour each. There was a break in the middle, so we hit the break, and one of the people in the audience comes up to me and he said, style. And I said, really? He said, yeah, it's cool. And I thought, what? So I looked down, and I realized that I have, in my haste, in the men's room, tucked my shirt into my pants. So, and spent the first hour. So, it was regrettable. So I had to go back for the next hour, and I had to decide, okay, do I do the next hour like this, or do I, take it out? Show of hands, who thinks I took it out? What do I look like? Of course I took it out. Come on. So, oh, thanks. So, anyway, do I have to use this one? I have to. Okay. It's weird. So anyway, we'll get on with things, but we're doing something a little bit different this year, interactive, reactive, if you will. And so if you want to make any comments or you want to ask any questions, I probably will not get to them till sometime during today, but if you go to slido.com, you can make comments as we go through, ask questions of me. If I can't answer it today at the end of this, then I will certainly answer it within the day and get back to you. A lot of times people ask figures and things, and that takes a little bit longer, but we wanted to make sure that you had a chance to participate. So, let's start. So, what we're going to talk about today is, I read this quote by Jim Kenney, and I really liked it because I think that, we were talking yesterday to the head of Global for Williams-Sonoma, and she said something that I thought was very much in line with this, which is sometimes you're so busy working that you don't have time to look up and say, what's going on with the consumer, what's going on around us? So that is my intent with all of these presentations, is to sort of give you an insight, have you take a breath, something you can take with you, and know that this entire presentation and extras beyond that are going to be available on the website, so you'll be able to sort of get that too. Right now we are in a time of seismic shift, but it is still a renaissance. And a renaissance is a rebirth. It's a period where we look at things sort of falling away that we're used to. During the Italian Renaissance, sculpture faded away, but that made room for painting, made that into an art form that was really untouchable. So really this type of period opens up chances for innovation. Some of the emergent trends of the 2000s that have really affected our industry and will continue to affect them, and some of us are kind of in denial about them, but I wanted to bring them up because they're making a lot of changes possible and a lot of changes necessary. They're generally declines. The income decline, home ownership decline, we'll see some of that. The marriage decline, which changes the way people register and how we get housewares products into people's homes. The birth decline. Even life expectancy decline in boomers. We've had a drop in that over the past few years. Luckily, we're projected to gain it back. And home mobility decline. And when we talk about home mobility, we're not just talking about whether or not you can move your home, whether you can move into a different home, whether you're in an apartment and you can afford to buy a home. So all of those things are sort of setting a framework for that we have to address to sort of say, how are we going to get beyond this? In terms of commerce, right now, 2018 outlook is fairly good. E-commerce sales are up by 15% this year. It accounted to almost just shy of 10% of retail sales in 2017, so that's very healthy. GDP of 3% for 2018 is projected versus 2.3 in 17 and 1.6 in 16. So it's better, still modest, but better. And retail sales, excluding gas, are projected to be up 4.6% over last year, which was 4.2%. So some solid, steady, some solid, steady gains. When we look at American households, again, this is probably the boring part of it, but total housing starts went up 9.7% in January, which is great news. Seasonally adjusted, that finishes us up at the year at 1.326 million, up from 1.9 million last year. So, because last year sort of dropped off at the end. Existing home sales are struggling mainly because there's kind of a tight inventory and because, but it's still expected to be up 1.6% to 5.6 million. And then we look at home ownership. Home ownership is now up to 64%, but there's been a lot of renter growth in the 55 and over. That's actually healthy because it's letting younger people buy and get into homes as opposed to people holding onto their homes, which is really what's happening in the UK right now. And multi-generational households, very important. 19% of households, 60 million people in the United States alone, are multi-generational households. That means parents moving back in with their boomer kids, boomers' kids moving back in with their boomer parents. And so we're having multiple generations in a household, which always affects the type of things that we buy and the type of things that we want to buy and the life we want to live. In terms of where housewares is going, so we have some good news. NPD is projecting that right now kitchen appliances, home environment appliances, and major appliances are on a 5 to 10 year growth phase. That's mainly due to population shifts. We're heading into a period where parts of the population that buy, the ages where people buy those things, is going to rise. But also in 2017, we had some really nice solid figures. Small kitchen electrics were up 7%. Home environment and appliances were up 6%. I wanted to talk about blurred lines in terms of generations and the way they act. Because right now, we're in a really important period of reverse mentoring. What that means is that older generations, doesn't matter whether they're X or boomers or prime timers, are looking to younger generations to figure out ways to live, to figure out better ways to live, to figure out technology in some cases. But in general, we're away from sort of upward mentoring where younger generations look at older generations to imagine how they can live. It's absolutely the reverse right now. It's one of the reasons why millennials have been so influential. So now that we've addressed those blurred lines, let's look at some of the generations because they do have distinctly different attributes, and we like to update every year and say, okay, this is what these generations look like right now. So we'll look at 4 generations. Millennials first, age 22 to 42. Pew says that they are just hitting 40 this year, so there's some disparity in those 2 years. But 87 million, they represent 27% of the population. And if we look at the ethic, the sort of foundation attributes that they have, you can see they're very individualistic. They're influential, of course. They're non-traditional. They like to solve existing problems in new ways. They are experience-driven. They are 24/7 lifestyles. To give an example of what that means, 19% of them answer emails and shop on the toilet. So there is no downtime. When we look at Gen X, 43 to 53, 41 million and 13% of the population. They're practical and sensible. They were hit very hard with the recession, the recent recession. And so they are much more pragmatic. They're much more careful. They use coupons, digital or otherwise, and more than any other generation by double. And they really do look for bargains. They look for value. Then we go to boomers. 54 to 73, 79 million. They're 25% of the population, and they're in a very interesting phase right now. They're much healthier than they expected to be. They feel better with more energy than they expected to feel. So they're much more connected, and you're going to see some of the real growth that we've had in digital acumen of this generation. Youthful and energetic, very health and wellness focused. They feel good, and they want to keep feeling good. They're into convenience. You know, that's still a sort of part of, you know, that lagged in from before. It hasn't really gone away. And they're very much about personal and now social expression. We've seen large increases in boomers joining social media and becoming much more active on that. And then we have prime timers. Prime timers age 74 and over, 28 million, 9% of the population. I'm not going to lie, and I think I say this every year, this generation spends only about 4% of their income in housewares. A lot of those decisions, you know, they have a lot of what they need. They sort of, when they move in with their boomer kids in some cases, they, you know, sort of let them make the decisions about that. But they're very much into stability, security. They're concerned with well-being, certainly. They're family-focused, and they love travel. They're spending a lot of money on experiential travel and just experiences in general. And, of course, comfort. So let's look a little bit deeper into millennials. The current need to know. They're single longer. Single women, very important. They represented 17% of home buyers last year, total home buyers. And last year was the first year that millennials bought more homes in the United States than any other generation, including boomers. So it's very important to consider them, you know, new homeowners and what that means. More than 40% are parents, and 80% will be parents within the next 10 to 15 years. So we still have that, you know, I'll still talk to people and they'll look at me and like talk about millennials as if they're still in college. So we really have to kind of get past that, see them as parents and see them as responsible adults. 63% have 10,000 or more still in college debt. 5 out of 6 connect with companies on social media networks, not on that company's website. They find them through social media, and they stay in touch with them through social media. Peers definitely influence their spending decision, but it's not peers of their generation necessarily. When we say peers, we mean millennials are more influenced by consumer reviews than any other generation, even boomers. So when ratings and reviews are very important to them, we talk about peers in terms of purchasing peers, really. They're certainly concerned with healthy lifestyles, but they have a realism about it that's like commensurate with their age. It's like they still do fucked up things. They expect business to be involved in social issues, and that's really important. They want businesses to give back. They want businesses to be responsible because they know that companies, brands, businesses can do much more for whatever their cause is, be it the environment or, you know, any other concern that they have, than they could possibly do as an individual. So they're forcing companies and retailers to be more responsible. Millennial parents received $11,000 on average in annual financial support from their boomer parents. So their boomer parents are giving them money for their kids, basically. And they spend more than any other generation on comfort and convenience purchases, probably because they're getting $11,000 from their parents. How many millennials in the audience before I piss you all off? Okay, I think I can take you. No, you know, just joking. Millennial meanings. And this is important because as we develop product, as we assort, we need to understand that homemade to a millennial doesn't mean the same thing as homemade to a Gen Xer, and certainly not as a boomer. Millennials are they're very happy to make a part of it. They'd rather do more, make more, create more with things that are partially done for them than to start completely from scratch. So, homemade doesn't mean every piece has to be from scratch. They do a lot of what we call kitchen hacks. And if you haven't come across this, go on YouTube and just type in kitchen hacks or just household hacks. Great things on there. Great things on Pinterest. This is just an example of, reusing a ketchup bottle to make pancakes. But when we look at this, of course, there's a danger to it for our industry. So how do we create something that does more than that does? Because, when you walk the floor, there's probably 10 things that do the exact same thing that they would normally have to spend, $12, $14 on. So they also are into experimentation. They like meal preparation. They like doing new things. They like trying new things. So providing that is very important to them. And also, they're very big into new learning. So they will watch videos. Again, more than any other generation, they will watch videos while they're cooking. And they have, a recipe. They have the experience. They're watching somebody do it. So it helps them learn. They're very passionate about learning. Google research indicates that online 25 to 34-year-olds enjoy the process as much as they enjoy the end result. And that's important because the more enjoyable that is, the more that gives us the potential to get in there and inspire them with new things to be a part of that process. Let's look at Gen X and try to ignore how goofy he looks with that sweater tied around his waist. They are a bridge generation, so they're sort of between millennials and boomers. They are only 10 years wide, as opposed to the other generations. Millennials and boomers are both 20-year generations. It's easy to it's easy to lose them. A lot of people ignore them, but right now it's important that you don't. They are in the midst of parenthood. They're the largest family generation. They're active, balanced, and happy. They have really started getting that work balance thing down that boomers, we never seem to get it right. 59% of them own a home. They're starting to take business leadership roles career-wise, and they account for 31% of total U.S. income. Now, when you consider that they're only 13% of the population, it's a huge number. So, that said, 45% of their net worth was lost during the recession. So we really have to, this is why when we talk about them, we say that they're very value conscious, they're very sensitive to price, and they're sensitive to price value. But they make investments in objects that are going to last and that have value and that have multiple uses and things like that. Gen X men are more involved in parenting and household tasks. Bullshit. Well, actually, so I dug into this a little bit, and one of the things that this is predicated on was the fact that Gen X men teach their kids how to do things by watching YouTube videos with them. So I put some links in here for you to all click through on when you see it, but it's really, really enjoyable. And some are caring for aging parents, which again, we get into that multi-generational home thing, and we look at how important that is. This group is in their peak spending, earning, and investing years. So again, it's very fertile ground. We really want to engage them now because they're very open. They have a lot of new needs. Baby boomers. The new need to know, 50% of the population, of the U.S. population, are people over 50. Currently, they control 70% of disposable income in the United States. So again, it's very easy to think, boomers, they're getting old, they're not spending money on home anymore. And we are spending money on home, we're not getting old. They are expected to inherit $15 trillion in the next 20 years. So engaging them and making sure that we're meaningful to them is really important to our success. Spending by those over 50 will increase 58% over the next 20 years. While spending 25 to 50 will only grow 24%. So it's important, again, we've got to engage, we've got to make sure that they stay engaged with home and housewares. 63% of boomer households have at least one person working, and they view food as key to living a longer quality life. There's a natural association with And I know that a lot of this concentrates on food, so I apologize if we're not paying enough attention to small electrics and other categories. But food and food preparation is key to these people, and they have more time to do more interesting things. So they're, many of, unlike Gen Xers, where you've got both people working in the household. Prime timers. Still important because they're still parts of the household. And so even though they're not spending a lot of their own money, their needs are very much being answered by boomer money. So they're very pragmatic. They grew up in the Great Depression. They see it all happening again. They have very traditional values, hardworking, loyal. They're getting older, and so they do need more care. By 2030, all the baby boomers will have moved into this group of 65 plus. And by 2035, 1 in 3 U.S. households versus today's 1 in 5 will be headed by someone 65 or older. So again, it's important not to leave this consumer behind, to make sure that we understand what the needs are of someone in this age group, and to re-engage, frankly. Multi-generational living is shifting the housing market right now. We talked about it being 19% of American households, and 58% of those over age 65 are married. 79% of them own their homes outright, which is what gives them a lot of disposable income and a lot of influence in terms of having money to pass down. So we've never talked about Gen Z before. This is the first time we're talking about them, but they're a very important part of the market and becoming more so because they're the next generation of influencers, if nothing else. But there's money behind them. So 93% of them, 93% of Gen Z parents say that their children have an influence on how their family spends money. So let's look at them. They're born after 1996, 86 million, to date, the largest generation of Americans. They've already outpaced boomers and millennials. They're called the I generation because they've never had to live without the internet. They make up the largest percentage of the U.S. population, 31% of the population, and they contribute $44 billion to the American economy. By 2020, they'll account for 1/3 of the U.S. population. They are much more about regaining balance with technology. This generation actually enjoys retail, especially retail that is, how can I put it, that specializes in something. So they like retailers with stories about this or about that, as opposed to large sort of mixed bag department store type retailers. They're very racially diverse, and they're realistic and practical about their future. So when we compare millennials to Gen Z, just to sort of give you a benchmark, I really like this, this graphic. So on media, millennials are about fantasy. Gen Z is about dystopian stories. Millennials are about text messages, whereas Gen Z very much about images. So that changes the story about how we do packaging. It changes how we're able to tell stories on social media and elsewhere when we know that they are much more inclined to infer product capabilities, product attributes through an image on a package more than they are to read it. They are realists versus millennials being optimists. They want to work hard for success versus millennials who really kind of wanted to be discovered. Because the internet made people think that that was possible. Like here's your 15 minutes of fame and it might be your entire life. But I think that now you're heading into a group that understands that doesn't really happen. Millennials sought prolonged adolescence, whereas first indications are that Gen Z are upaging. So for example, the top of this generation is already saving. They have an average savings rate of 6% if they have a bank account, which is, when you look at this generation never saved at all. This age group. So it's interesting to see that. And they're about flexible stability versus flexible variety, which sort of changes the way, let's put it this way, this is not the generation that's going to come in on Tuesday and then on Friday ask if they're being promoted. So we can, yeah, you all know it. You guys do it, you millennials in the back. I quit. And then we get to, some of their other need to knows, especially about food. So They like easy-to-assemble meals, but they're not afraid of involved foods. They're not afraid of preparation. They actually like it. We're seeing a big decline in ready-to-eat in-home meals. So they don't like things that are already ready to eat. They don't like prepared food as much. They want to be a part of it. And 76% of them versus 50% of millennials at their age said that they wish their hobbies could turn into full-time jobs. So that's interesting, especially in our industry, where they're seeing so much on television and on various media about, cooking, baking, and a lot of other household things. Consumers and evolution. What's interesting is just, this is sort of the traditional linear life stage trajectory, and I like this image because it sort of tells us how different things are going to be. You live with parents, you get an education, you start a career, you get married or you buy a house or both, you probably have children, and then the children leave home. The estimated trajectory of millennials is very different. You live with parents, you get an education. You may move in with friends, you may move back in with your parents. You might travel abroad and not start your career right away, or you could start your career. You then maybe cohabit with a partner, possibly get married. You buy a home, you might have children, or you might go back to school. So when you look at all of these different options, you realize how important it is to stay in touch with social media and see what people are doing, who you're selling to, because it's not a simple formula anymore. The aspirations aren't necessarily to get married or buy a house. Now, Housewares has actually been very lucky because we've been able to supplant some lost sales on registry with the fact that right now, cooking, baking, and a lot of things around the house, decorating, things like that, are very hot. So we've been able to garner back some of that money. 57% of American households have no kids. We just wanted to sort of point up a few key facts about the American household that a lot of people don't realize. Because we all go around with a picture in our heads of mom and pop and 2 kids and half a dog. 28% of households are single person. That's up 10 points from 1970. And down 16 points, 23% of households are married couples with kids. By the way, that middle figure, that 28%, we're not talking about single households like people not married. We're talking about one person living under one roof. So think about what that means when that number's climbing. And what does it mean for storage? What does it mean for other products that we're selling, that we're creating? Okay, so we take all of that, and how do we address it? How do we sort of approach that and say, okay, so how do I find solutions? What do I focus on when everybody's everything, and every generation is acting like every other generation? I was listening to a talk on NPR, and they were talking about a psychologist named Abraham Maslow, and he created what he called the hierarchy of needs. This man sort of changed the face of psychology. Before he came along, psychology was about analyzing sick people. And he said, wait a second, psychology should be about looking at every person and saying, how can people's lives be bettered by this science? Because if all you do is study sick people, you're just going to know how to make more sick people, or identify sick people. So what he did was he said, he looked at people who were happy, and he said, these are the needs that they have. They have 5 essential needs. Physiological needs, which is basically food, water, shelter, clothing, reproduction. Safety needs, which is personal security, employment, resources, health, property. Love and belonging, friendship, intimacy, family, that feeling of belonging. Esteem, which is outbound and inbound, so respect, self-esteem, recognition, status, all of that. And then finally, self-actualization, which is when we say, okay, I've figured out society, now I'm going to look inside and figure myself out. And he saw this as a sort of timeline type of thing as well. So you started with the very basics at the bottom, and as you got older, you got the status and you got this and that. We kind of took this apart and said, okay, I like what's in it, because if every product that we create is really filling a need on some level, then and when we look at the successes that we're seeing today in our market, they're really all speaking to one of these things. But we have to look at it differently, because now people sort of jump from place to place. You've got 9-year-olds, meditating and self-actualizing, and people don't really think of things. So we sort of took it and made it a circle and said, since we can do this at any point, we could decide in the morning we could be meditating, in the afternoon we could be really devoted to loving and family. How do we look at this, and not as a pyramid, but treat all consumers regardless of generation and all development along these lines? So let's give an example. So physiological needs: air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproduction. If we look at the way people feel right now, environmental fears for the first time rank among Americans' top 10 fears. It's about air pollution, it's water, it's weather, it's everything that's making us feel so fearful and insecure about our environment that, for some of us, it's almost primal. We worry about water quality. So I don't know if you can read the chart on the right, but basically, there's been a 31% increase in the last 5 years of people who were worried about pollution of rivers, pollution of reservoirs, and a 19% increase about people worried about pollution of just drinking water. So, when we look at the fact that only 16% own a filtration system in their home, and 56% say they're either concerned or extremely concerned about the quality of their water, this is a gap. It's like a gap analysis, okay? So what is our industry doing? And we see the people in our industry developing filters and things like that. So we wanted to just sort of focus on people who are doing it right, and to say we all need to look at these basic needs and make sure that, if not all, at least a good part of our products are serving some function in here. So we look at, we're seeing a lot of advances in air quality, a lot of choices for consumers. Air purifier market is forecast for compound annual growth of more than 8%. We look at food quality, and you see the DIY, the GIY, all of these sort of grow it yourself, and the evolution of agri-hoods, which are small agricultural farms that houses are built around so that people can grow, buy fresh, and just have it right at their door. So, and when we look at our industry, are we providing ways to safely store, ways to grow food, ways to harvest that, ways to prepare all of that fresh? And we look at some of the other things that people are doing in their homes, growing in their own kitchens. So we sort of broke it down to survivors and thrivers and what the different attitudes of those were. Survivors are going to do products aligned to specific tasks, whereas thrivers are really going to be offering solutions that target our fears, target our needs, our concerns. Survivors will sell trust with features and attributes. But thrivers will do that plus amplify it by engaging consumers, because we believe other consumers more than we believe any particular retailer or any particular brand. Survivors are still about buying your own, whereas really thrivers are about growing your own, making your own. And survivors are still kind of on an external environmental focus, whereas thrivers are really about internal. Where the money is in our industry is the people who are worried about what's going on inside their home. Air quality in their home, really bad. I think we had a slide up here about that. And then we just put up a few of the innovators, people like Baby Bullet, who were letting you make your own baby food at home. Alan Breathe, that's a customizable air purifier. Miracle Grow, who has now, I think, 7 different styles of home herb growing sort of setups. And all the new innovations about telling the, you can tell whether meats are fresh or not with different devices. So it's not all electronic, but it's important to understand that this is a significant part of this. And then just as a wrap-up, we're going back to basics here. So it's really about safety, it's about addressing people's concerns and educating them and helping them find solutions. The second one is safety needs. So that's personal security, employment, resources, health, property. One of the pieces that we've really seen grow is security and household penetration. 18% in the US, it's expected to be up to 33% by 2022. So all of these home security kits where you're not hiring out anymore, you're setting it up yourself, you're customizing it. It's very simple. People like Simply Safe and others who let you do this. Conservation is another part when we look at resources. Wasted commodities are incredible, and consumers are becoming more and more aware of how much we waste. On average, about 20 to 40% of all commodities that are harvested and produced are wasted in the United States. So how can we lessen that, especially with fresh products? How can we keep things fresher longer? You've got all of the large appliance companies focusing on this and really advertising how they keep things fresher longer. A lot of important books coming out about it, like Zero Waste Lifestyle, which is a bestseller for last year. We're also looking a lot at sleep quality. So how important is sleep? And how much more can we do when we sleep properly? I'm the wrong person to ask today, but there's, so Sleepyon combines sound, light therapy, sleep-inducing aromas. 7 Hugs is a program where you can put a puck on your kid's mattress, and you will know how well they're sleeping, and then you can teach them how to do things, that help them sleep better. And of course, eating healthy. So this was an allrecipes.com survey that said, to what degree is healthful eating and cooking a priority for you and your family in the next year? If you put together high priority and somewhat of a high priority, you get every generation up to 96% saying that it's, yes, there's some variances. Clearly, boomers probably, were kind of like, I'll have that extra brownie. But the whole idea, and there's a strong correlation between cooking fresh and it being healthy for you, so we always look at that. The latest All Recipes research also, which of the following describes your reasons for eating more healthfully in 2017? Better overall health, avoid negative health, lose weight, and more energy. And the reason why this type of data is important is if your product is geared towards millennials, then really you want to be sort of sitting between better overall health and avoid negative health. If you're about losing weight, then, or having more energy, then that's going to be more directed to boomers. So really think about who are you selling to, and what types of products, what is their main concern. Another part of the survey was which of these are healthful eating priorities for you. And there were a couple of surprises. 59% said eating breakfast was more of a priority. And we are seeing a lot of more fresh breakfast now. Preparing meals at home, 59%. Snacking instead of eating a meal, and cooking from recipes, because it's become easier now, and because there's tutorials. And you've got younger generations more engaged in that. So again, the survivors, thrivers, this idea of endless natural resources really being, and as opposed to directing towards diminishing natural resources, wasteful consumption, wasteful production processes versus sustainable ones, global concerns and views versus micro concerns and views. Again, we're starting to look closer and closer to home. So while we're certainly concerned globally, we are, weather and a lot of other things are contributing to many generations looking a little bit closer to home. And then survivors are really about reactive, solution-focused issues, whereas thrivers are reactive, but they're also proactive, because they know that millennials are about proactive wellness. They're not like boomers going to wait till they feel sick to go to the doctor. They're going to go, they're going to get their levels set, they're going to, take care of themselves the whole time. And then we look at the innovators, people like Samsung, who has an amazing new, we got this scale, and it just tells me so much more about myself than I ever wanted to know. But it was a Christmas present, which is basically a nice way of saying you're fat. Canary, the great security systems, LifeLock. So, and a lot of this is not, LifeLock's not about physical security, it's about data security. This term of safety and security is very broad across a lot of different categories. And the wrap is just that we're about mindful living. Well-being is the new relevance, and it all lives in safety for the most part. So really pay attention to our communities, ourselves, and understand that the aspiration is to be healthy. You know, it's never been more important to every generation, so how are we going to wrap that in a product, to wrap it in an experience? Love and belonging. So that's friendship, intimacy, family, a sense of connection. So one of the things, again, that's really helped our industry is this idea of the open kitchen concept, because it allows us to entertain, it allows us to socialize. We have someplace to, help the kids do homework, and it really positions that part of the home for experiences as opposed to just tasks. Half of renovating homeowners this year in a House 2018 survey are opening their kitchen to another interior space in the house. Millennials do a lot of entertaining, and you can sort of see how they're advancing that sort of, what matters to them, also by generation, what matters, decor, party decorations, things like that. The important thing to remember about millennials versus other generations is this: they're better entertainers because they don't drag it out. When boomers entertain, they start with, like, you walk in the door, you get cheese and you get wine, and then you sit down to dinner and you get dinner, and then after you get dessert, and then after, maybe they'll, have another cocktail or something. Millennials aren't like that. They're much more, they're much more of the moment. They spend about 5 days less on average planning an event, planning having people over. They're much more likely to say, let's have a cocktail party and have everybody bring something, as opposed to planning every bit of it themselves. And that means a lot of opportunity, because they don't see entertaining as an intimidating, expensive thing. They'll say, let's get together for game night and do something interesting inside of that, as opposed to having to do the whole thing of all this, this work. Maker culture is moving on, so we really have to, millennials in particular, but Gen X too, they want constant reinvention. They want new things to do, they want new things that they can discover doing, and we are sort of charged with helping them connect with their inner creative, whatever that creative is. A couple of things that I thought were really interesting. On the right is a recent catalog from John Lewis, and on the left is a homepage from Etsy. And what's interesting is you're starting to see people, retailers, talk outside of generations, and talk in, you'll be hearing this more, talk in tribes. So what's your tribe? And I don't know if you can read it, but John Lewis in the UK did this catalog where they said, so which style suits you? Luxury lovers, nomadic settlers, Scandi fans, or British eclectics? And you look at Etsy, it's like, well, is it gifts for pet lovers? Gifts for foodies? What are your interests? What types of gifts are you trying to give? So not talking to people in terms of their whole life, but just some of their interests. And we just went through a few catalogs from this past fall. Retails, websites, but primarily print on this. And we're just amazed at how fourth quarter there was such a plethora of gifting stories. So there was gifts for the baker, gifts for the cook. You had gifts for the home bartender, which is a very big category right now. Gifts for the host. Gifts for the health enthusiast. Gifts for the coffee snob. And we were just blown away by all of these gift stories that were all about housewares. The New York Times listed the top 5 gift items for wedding gift items, and 3 of them were housewares. So it's, we've really got, this is a great way of us telling constantly new stories about housewares and what's interesting in there. And we have to start thinking in terms of what are sort of silos of interest. There are a lot of online sources for food inspiration, but one of the things, this was from NPD, and they picked, they're showing us what are the top sort of websites for people who, look online to find more interesting ideas of what to do, because there's a lot of people say that they just don't have new ideas. So, but when we look at this, are we properly partnering with these people? Are we creating the right alliances to make sure that our products get in with these people? The other thing is fun. More NPD data. 97% of Americans believe that fun is important, but only 53% say that they're having enough. 81% say that an under $5 purchase can turn a bad day into a great day. 65% find fun treating others, and time with family and friends sort of tops the list of fun things. So are we providing products and opportunities that help people spend time with their family, that are interesting things to do with their friends? These are just some things from Fred and Friends, who of course I'm partial to, but they tell great stories, great short stories of affordable items that are just giftable, And we have to start thinking of ourselves as a gift industry, because there's a tremendous amount of growth and opportunity in that. Survivors, thrivers in love and belonging. Closed kitchens for privacy, and that's sort of what they're merchandising to. Open kitchens for connectivity. Entertaining on special occasions versus entertaining regularly and on impulse. Millennials do more impulse entertaining than planned entertaining. And by impulse, it's like I said, it's a sort of a short story. Celebrating milestones, birthdays, anniversaries, things like that, new jobs, as opposed to celebrating the moments. Let's just do something, and celebrate today. DIY for professional results versus DIY for shareable, photo-worthy experiences. People want things that they can share. And a part of that's going to be making it easy, of course. And then the innovators, we love what Target's doing with Honey Fund. It's an interesting way of Target acknowledging the fact that people are buying experiences. So they have created that. Honey Fund is an experience registry, sort of. And then the wrap-up is, be a brand of endearment. Don't be a brand of mandate. We are this, and we do this. Create experiences for people that they love, and they will be back to help you create to let you help them create other experiences. When we look at esteem, respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom, it's interesting. These markers used to be so much more tangible. It was like we could go out and buy something that was very statusy, or we could, but now even self-esteem is very much ruled by peers and social media. And we can be very esteemed in one portion of our lives on social media and more of an observer on other parts. So social media has really changed the way esteem works in a way, because we want the esteem of people that we don't even know. And people are influencing our self-opinion by that. And when we look at social media usage, look at the changes between 2008 and 2018. Millennials, 16% increase. Gen X, 53% increase. Boomers, 146% increase in the number of boomers actively engaged in one or more social media sites. So it's a relatively short period. But honestly, tablets and a lot of other things have made boomers joining social media much more accessible. We also wanted to look at how different age groups sort of approach, I won't dwell on this, but you can look back at it, but how different generations live on different sites. So Facebook, the dark blue, is clearly the biggest by far among all of them. But when we look at, although they've had a lot of drop-off lately in 15 to 29-year-olds, but 30 to 49, big disparity between Facebook and Instagram. And as you see, as people get older, less and less Instagram, less Twitter. So it's important when you're talking to people and when you're trying to connect on social media to understand where is your target talking. Who are they talking to? Who are they listening to? What's their media? The kitchen is a reflection of who we are, and status really lives there. So, when we look at the things that people are purchasing, you have to have decorative value. And we talk about this a lot because right now, consumers are evaluating products on countertop worthiness. Space is at a premium. We don't have a lot of storage space. The average home has shrunk by 11% in the last 7 years. And so that means that we are living in smaller spaces. We can't put things away. They've got to look good. And also, high design plus function is really the value of better product. I mean, that's the language of better product. Also, esteem is about recognizing the individual. So I won't judge her for doing a Kim Kardashian pancake or whatever the fuck that is. But she has found a way to create this object that she's going to share socially. When we look at this, I don't know if you can see it, this new Breville toaster, it's 100% about making it an individual experience. There's a button on it that just says, a bit more. So it will remember how you like your toast. after you hit that a bit more button, or it'll just take it back down. This company called Copy Pastry. You send them a picture, and they'll send you back a cookie mold, a cookie press, that lets you make your face, your dog's face, a couple's face, so all of those things. And then this is like my ultimate laziness thing. It's a trash pail that you just sweep to it, and it vacuums up all the stuff that you sweep over there. So it's a great product. Even large kitchen appliances. This Samsung refrigerator is absolutely brilliant. Okay? So what you're seeing is a pullout in the center of 4 of the screens that it can have. But it is a family center. Your family can sit in the kitchen, watch a movie. You can leave reminders. It has a motion sensor, so when somebody walks into the kitchen, it knows, and it will put a reminder on the screen that says, don't forget to go to practice today. It has a family schedule, which you can sort of see in there. Recipes, you can watch videos while you cook. I mean, it is an entire media center. It's your media center, it's your laptop. You're going to have kids fighting over the remote for the fridge. It has a camera so that kids don't stand there in front of the fridge with the door open, so you can see what's on the inside of the fridge without ever opening it. You can access it while you're in the grocery store to say, do I have eggs? Let me just look at the inside of my fridge. You can pull up the inside of your fridge on your phone. So brilliant products that really help create value. This is what we were talking about before, or I was talking about before. This idea that we used to have housewares moving into people's homes with registries. So we, and that people are getting married at a much lower rate. I'll have some of this on a slide in the series that you get, but basically, men right now are marrying at an average age of 29 years, and women are marrying at 27. So big increases, you know, and so when we look at that, how else are people registering for our product? When do they encounter our product? Well, they encounter our product at housewarmings and just a day-to-day interesting product that people want to use. It's all the more reason why we can't be focused on these life events. We have to be focused on making every day terrific. Social media equals status, self-esteem, recognition, all of that. 32% of consumers, 47% of millennials have used social media or texted while eating. So aggravating. But people spend more time reading about food than online, 46% than in print, 31%. And 40% learn about food from websites, apps, or blogs, and that's total consumer, not just millennials. So again, it makes your presence there more important. I loved this. Social media explained. Twitter, I am eating a hashtag donut. Facebook, I like donuts. Instagram, here's a vintage photo of my donut. YouTube, watch me eating a donut. LinkedIn, my skills include donut eating. And Pinterest, here's a donut recipe. So, I mean, this is such a great sort of upshot. But understand social media and where you place yourself and how accessible you are is critical. Engaging consumers to share you is super important. 63% of millennials say an easy recipe is more important than nutrition. 40% will cook just because they have the ingredients. And more people are looking to just cook with what they have in the house. And that's not just millennials. Overall market. What is the appliance of choice? 44% of consumers who cook more than 3 times a week use the stove. 25% prefer the oven. And 25% choose the microwave. Over half would like to meal plan in 2017. Why? 44% say to save money. 59% say to eat healthy. 55% say so they can waste less food, which is interesting how high that last percentage is. But how are we enabling that? Is there some way that we as an industry can enable that behavior? 51% of Americans would prepare dinner at home more often if they just had new ideas. The average American household makes 6 recipes in a month. Again and again and again. So, and recipes is like spaghetti and meatballs, okay? So they're looking for easy, fast ways to do things that they have in the house. And then just the innovators. And we're talking about social media here and esteem. So, I mean, I love iRobot has really sort of promoted this thing like put your pet on your Roomba and like let him ride it around. Although I think the woman who dressed her cat up as a shark, that's just kind of cruel. But even the company store, buy one, give one, you know, they're doing the whole Tom Shoes thing. Peloton, which makes stationary bikes into a social event. You can be alone if you want, or you can exercise with others. You can follow people without being a stalker, and it's an immersive experience. So the wrap on this is really just the idea that retailers and manufacturers have to strategize experience of the consumer as much as they strategize the actual product they're making. Consumers want new ways to acquire status, and cooking and really a lot of these household products are shareable if we make them that way. Self-actualization is the last part of it. And this is just the desire to become the most we can be. This idea of the fluid self is really interesting because it's opened up a lot of doors for our industry, for home decor. If you're a boomer, chances are you grew up with parents that had like one painting on the wall and they had that painting there your whole life. Whereas now you look at other, we don't keep a single decor style. We don't keep a single anything. We're in constant evolution. And this idea, I love the way Adobe Visual Trend Report put it. They said a few years ago people were talking about race and ethnicity, but now we're looking at the fluid self, identity as a vast and ever-changing range of ideas that should be celebrated. This idea of constantly rediscovering ourselves, what we can do, what we're capable of, what we can create, that's a business we can feed, giving people ideas of how to create. Your brand, whether you're a brand or you're a retailer, has to be about discovery. This is a store, I don't know if any of you have been to New York recently or are planning to go to New York. It's a store called Story, but you can also read about them on thisisstory.com. And Story was started by a woman named Rachel, who I had the pleasure of meeting. She said, you know what, I get so bored with stores. She said that I decided I'm going to do a store, and I'm going to change my complete assortment every 2 months. And every 2 months, she shuts down for a week, and she reopens. And she started with Love Story, and then she did Fresh Story, and then she did Wellness Story, and then she did Cool Story. She constantly rotates local producers with people as large as Target. Target's partnered with her as well to sell in store. And they move in and they move out in the name of being cool. And it's an amazing store, and you can see all the stories online. But in that same vein, people like Hinge, which is Hinge's milestone market, they're talking about when you achieve something in your life, go to Hinge and reward yourself or reward somebody else, whether it is, you know, your anniversary, or whether you've just gotten that big job or your first baby. And they talk about real things that happen very sort of individually, and they have everything from relationships with Plated to Casper to Zola. So it's very much a sort of a life registry and an experience registry, as much more than any specific type of product. Millennials aren't cooking alone, and I thought it was interesting to point out that top 5 crafts by spend, number 1 is edible arts at 17%. So this idea of crafting and being a cook, being a baker, being a chef, all of this is really speaking into the passion of different generations. Millennials tend to cook with other people, which is great. And also understand that we're moving from a knower mindset to a learner mindset. Very important. People don't feel like they have to know everything going in. They're very open to learning. This, again, more NPD data, but it really just talks about the fact that most meal preparers are confident in the kitchen, but 4 out of 10 struggle to make meals that meet their expectations. So to me, that's like, you know, that's what's the next spiralizer. How can I put something on the plate that I'm doing with what I already have that makes it interesting, makes it unique, keeps the nutrition up, works with things I already have, is shareable. But this idea of having such a large percent of the population really not thinking that things turn out the way they're supposed to is in direct conflict with the whole idea of being social and sharing. So how can we solve that? I'm just going to skip that one because I know we're running out of time. This is just going to tell you about Better Homes and Garden Food Survey and how home cooks are pursuing dinner time adventures. I put this in here because these are the top 10 cookbooks of 2017 in terms of volume sales. And I think it's interesting when you look at it. Of course, there's, Instant Pot is up there. But Skinny Taste, Fast and Slow, Pioneer Woman, the Instant Pot Electric Pressure Cooker Cookbook, Couple on Keto. So it's important to keep an eye on these things and say, where are people's heads at with food? Is it fresh prep? How does this affect your assortment? And what are people's attitudes about cooking at home and the types of things that they're looking to do? They're much more adventurous. People are really hungering for new ideas. And a part of it is because we're entertaining at home more. Smart appliances in general are about self-actualization because they're about giving us time. They're about helping us discover what we can do, and they're about saving us time for real life with family, real life with friends. I thought this was interesting. Smart home purchasers, the what, where, and why. So what are you purchasing in smart home? 75% said that they're purchasing safety and comfort, and 68% said they were purchasing really energy efficiency. Where's the first place that you're going to put this new technology? Number 1 was the kitchen. Number 2 was the front door. And number 3 was the living room. And then finally, how do different generations look at smart technology? Millennials look at smart technology about making my home convenient for daily tasks, making daily tasks easier. Gen Xers look at it about creating a healthy environment in my home. And boomers look at it as adding value to their home. So it's important when you're talking to different generations to know what you're speaking to. And just, when we look at innovators for self-actualization, I love this Sub-Zero and Wolf quote. I got more ideas for my kitchen in 90 minutes than I did in 90 days on my own. Test drive working appliances, see full-scale kitchens. So people who bring you in and really experts that take you through processes, like Williams-Sonoma's cooking school. This whole idea of iRobot and these great appliances that will clean your pool or wash your floor or vacuum your rug. Things that save us time and take us away from the mundane, and even that in a social and fun way that we can share. And of course, Alexa. And the wrap on that is just the act of realizing that we can all be individuals and providing the capability to be individuals and to discover things about yourself in product. So in the final slide, how do we succeed? We succeed by embracing change. And what that means is to survive versus thrive. Survivors are selling objects on function really alone. Thrivers are selling function and intangibles. They're selling things like savings of time, savings of space. They're selling new skills and new learning and experience. Survivors are selling isolated monofunctional items that sit on a counter, that do one thing, or sit in a cabinet, whereas thrivers are really selling connected items and multifunctional items and personalizable items. Survivors are about task-oriented things versus thrivers who, of course, do the task, but it's about the experience of the whole. Products that deliver a needed utility versus products that deliver options and choices. So it's that toaster, okay? It's the needed utility, I gotta toast my bread. But the fact that I can teach it the way that I like it toasted so I never have to jiggle that stupid knob again over and over, that's the sort of sweet spot. Speaking in the language of objects versus speaking in the language of inspiration. It's not just another peeler, it does this. So really selling the experience and the inspiration of what you're gonna have. Brand-centric development, we are brand X. Our VBL, our visual brand language, is this. This is the way we look, this is the customer we serve, versus really being open to consumer-centric development and evolving with the consumer. KitchenAid is a great example of that. Also, the fact that you're selling to a crowd versus you're selling to individuals who want to be individuals. We don't want to be a part of a crowd. We want to be ourselves. So that wraps it for me. Thank you so much for spending so much time. Of course, we have no time for questions, but if anybody wants to come up and ask a question, say hi. Of course, we have Sligo too, so feel free. But thank you. Have a great day, great market, and thanks for spending another hour with me.